What's up, Art Hive? Welcome back to my studio. So since my arm is still a bit sore, I'm trying to ease my way into painting. So today I'm going to take a look at some of the artworks that you sent in for me to critique. So I have my giant coffee, my giant hat, and my obnoxious wig. Let's do this. Forgot I had to see. This is painted by a very productive person that's so incredibly productive and posts in my Discord all the time. And something I've been talking about a lot is proportions. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with using proportions like these, but since I'm going to talk about how I would have painted this, I'm going to change the proportions a bit. First thing I'm gonna do is to shrink the head. I would probably go with something like this. So now I'm going to take a look at the elbows. Like you can see here, the shoulders are straight, and this arm ends here, while this arm ends here. So it's quite a far distance. So I'm going to bring that up a bit to get that aligned. And I'm also going to widen the waist a lot. Something that I would really like to see in the hands, no matter if you choose to have line art or not, the top hand would have the thumb facing the body. So like what I'm trying to do is show this fleshy part of the hand that it's facing the viewer, right? The next thing I want to talk about is I'm very unsure about where the light is coming from. Is it from the thing in the hands? But if that's the case, why is there shadow down here and light here? And what I think you have done is you had this kind of green color here, and then you put a reddish bloom over it, and it turns really muddy. And the reason for that is, let me show you something real quick. This is a color wheel. This kind of bluish green color, it's somewhere here, right? So when you add red, that's opposite on the color wheel. And when you move towards the other side of the color wheel, the colors will meet in between and it will desaturate the color. And no matter what, if you're working digitally or traditionally, this is really important to know, and it's really handy because you can desaturate a color by adding the one opposite to it. But what happens here is that it really desaturates this entire area, and that makes it feel really dark. And now that we talked about that, I'm going to remove the floaty rose area just so we can talk about some other things in this picture. So that is something that you can think about. I've talked to this person about saturation before. I think it would be really interesting to see how you would go about working with less saturated colors. Something I haven't really mentioned to this person before is where the shadows are. Here, the shadows are like on every outline, but we're not outlining a 2D object. We're outlining a 3D object, right? But in 2D. So really establishing the light source is really important, and that is what really shows the form. So I'm going to just paint over this, and we'll see what we'll get. If you look at the color picker here and I poke around in the different areas in the skin tone, each and every one of them is really light. And I think that the reason for this is you're working on a white background, which really throws off your sense of light. So I'm going to just see if I can just darken this entire piece. So now we're really further down and we have a more neutral background. Oh no, gosh. I'm really starting to feel that arm. So let me just stop here and tell you what I'm doing. So I've chosen a light source. It's sort of above and in front of the character. So everything that sticks out, like the breasts, the nose, those are areas where I'm going to choose to have light. And everything that's like below, like the under the arms, everything like that, I will do darker. So I'm being really mindful with my light source here. So what I've done here is I have shrunken the head and the hands, I have widened the neck, the shoulders and the waist, and I've started to really establish a light source. And now when the entire picture is this dark, let me show you something really cool. You see how strong that white is now, because there's nothing white in the picture. If I do that to the original painting, it doesn't really have the same oomph to it, because everything is so light. But here you can really see that. And if you're going to choose to do some rim lights now, they're gonna really pop. Maybe some shine here on the nose area. You can add shines to the petals here. You can see how that really, like, the overall darkness of the picture really makes a difference, right? Hey, this is Editing Mando from the future. I had to stop really early in the process to rest my arm, but the morning after I decided to play around some more, and that's what you can see here. I do have a more painterly style than this person, but I think shading with the form in mind can be really powerful no matter what style you have. So I decided to just add some more shape around the cheeks, nose and lips. A really good way to practice is shading cubes, cylinders, cones and spheres, because that way of thinking applies to absolutely everything. As always, I put a lot of details around the eyes and gradually spend less and less time on details to give that feeling of focus. During this second painting session, I made sure to put really sharp highlights on areas that are supposed to be wet, like the eyes and the blood. A harsh contrast gives that sense of shininess, while more subtle shifts in value give a more matte look. Something I tried to incorporate was a bigger variation of color. This originally had one color for the skin and shading with a more red version of it. I made sure to have both red, yellow and blue shades in the skin. The hair in the original had a really good variation of hues, so I pushed that further and incorporated that into the ears as well and moved the lower ear. Even though it's turned down, it should begin in the same place as the other one. I also made sure that the folds in the clothes were affected by the light source we were talking about before, so each and every one of them gets a shading of their own with light on top and shadow below. My arm thankfully doesn't feel as bad as it used to, but I don't want to push it and I think you get the idea I'm trying to convey. I'm personally a big fan of muted colors and an overall neutral value, so the saturation and light I want to have really pops. Since this is my first ever paint over, I hope I didn't do too bad of a job. I originally intended to paint over several artwork in one video, but this one is already super long and I decided to make several videos instead. So make sure to let me know what you think of these types of videos in the comments. This will have to do for today. I'm going to rest my arm a bit. So thank you for sending in your artwork for me to critique, and thanks for watching. Bye!